everyone. We are in session from earlier this evening. Again, as always, pardon the back of my head, the back of my back, and everything else. Just for those of you who don't recognize us, we're the school district that's just up the hill from the world champion Cleveland Cavaliers. So, all right, so now we're out of executive session and we're on to item 3, the work session, and we start with item 3A, personnel. Can I take items 3A, 1 through 5 together?
So moved.
Okay, I need a motion.
Second.
All right, any questions, comments? Mr. Gaines, the roll. Oh,
I
yes,
do have a
go ahead, I'm
question.
sorry.
How does this impact our RIF? Is this move our RIF number down at all?
We're currently at 37 RIF positions,
Okay.
but 27 people on the RIF list. Okay.
Off English better.
Okay, so not to complicate things, but we have a set of positions that were RIFed.
Okay.
And then what's happening now is if people resign,
Okay.
they will leave, or if we have someone go on a leave of absence, they will leave for a year. We'll bring back someone from the RIF list,
Right.
which means that's one less person on the RIF list, which doesn't affect the amount of positions that we cut.
So are we positions, people who've been let go because of the RIF? Is it 37 or is it 27?
There's 27
Okay.
people left,
Okay.
but we still have 37 RIF positions on the books.
So in effect, so what you're saying then is we have 10, we went from 37, there's 37 RIF positions, 10 of those may be out for a year or
Either
something.
retirements, leave of absence, resigned.
Oh, well, I guess, what's the net? What's our net number?
How
Okay,
many people have you hired back?
How many people have we hired back?
right,
Well, we had 52
right.
on the RIF list, so now we have 37 on the RIF, or 27 on the RIF list.
So the
So we had 52. Okay, this is getting,
It's complicated because you
It's-
have positions versus,
we have positions,
Right.
and then we have people.
Okay. Well, then let's
Okay.
focus on people, because that's what all the people in the auditorium were talking about. How many, we started with 52, now we're down to 27?
27, that's
Okay.
correct.
That's, I mean, that was sort of what we mentioned that evening was the 52 was the bad, hard number, but we would, that's a significant movement. I mean, that's, okay.
yeah.
And we still have things in motion, so it could even,
Correct.
okay.
Yes.
I do have a question regarding the instructional specialist under 2B.
Yes.
Are these positions adding to our administrative load, or are they just teachers that work out of the board?
Those are teacher positions, program specialists, so they are at a 795. So we took 2 teachers from the classroom and we're moving them into the board office, but they are teaching positions under the 795, so they're not considered administrators.
Okay. And it just so happens that these 2 will be no longer teaching students, but they're,
That's correct. They're going to be working as coaches with the staff.
And so those are just 2 positions, 2 of the positions that I talked about, those that we're investing in, because we wanted to be able to give our teaching staff a person in science and social studies with some additional skills. So what that did open up, those 2 positions are newly created, which open up 2 positions of people off the RIF list to fill those positions.
I see really fine people on this list. I'm
Yeah.
afraid to mention names because I don't want to overlook people I don't know, but I happen to know some really great people that are being put into great
I think
positions.
the
in
school
this
said
job.
that, team said a lot of people, qualified people applied for those
Yeah.
positions. Yeah, because you need people with a lot of expertise
Yeah.
in those.
All right, Mr. Gainer?
Mr. Posh?
Yes.
Mr. Register?
Yes.
Mr. Silverman?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. Zucker?
Yes. All right, we can move on to item 3B, business service, each one separate, or together, do you know? Do we know?
Anyone? Anyone?
Separate.
Separate, okay, thank you, Mr. Petgak, the voice from beyond. So, item 3B1, recommendation to approve the agreement with the Wren Hill Group for school year 2016-2017. I need a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, questions, comments? Do we need to hear from Mr. Petgak?
No.
Anybody?
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Gainer?
Wait, I'm sorry,
Oh,
we just left, we were with Rachel Wixie. And so we decided to separate and go with a different company who will be responsible for hiring subs for all our employee groups.
Mr. Gaynor?
Mr. Register?
Yes.
Mr. Silverman?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. Zucker?
Yes.
Mr. Posh?
Yes.
Item 3B2, recommendation to approve the 2016-2017 insurance proposal for property liability and fleet insurance. I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Questions, comments, discussion?
Is this an increase from last year?
You can come over here if you want. I will. Yeah, thanks. At least you can sign.
It's a minor increase. Was an additional insurance that was added on, and off the top of my head, I don't have it in front of me. It was
Understand.
a few $1,000s more,
Okay.
but nothing substantial.
Okay.
Same company.
And all within your budget, Scott?
This is a shared arrangement, right? And this is pooled with other,
Yes, sir. It's
Other
through a House
school
School Council
districts.
recommended source.
is this our second year with them?
Yes, sir.
You don't mind staying just in case the third?
Sure.
Thanks. I have no idea yet, we'll see. So, okay, Mr. Gaynor?
Mr. Silverman?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. Zucker?
Yes.
Mr. Posh?
Yes.
Mr. Register?
Yes.
Okay, and item 3B3, recommendation to approve the June 7th, 2016 bid for the Delisle Option Center roof replacement. I need a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any questions, comments, or do you want to, anything you want to say?
This was the number one need. When we presented the roof evaluation of facade, the Delisle roof was considered the worst by our consultant based on leaks and the need for replacement. This is the flat deck. A few years ago, we redid the majority of that roof.
Is the flat portion, and is it the roof over the auto shop as well? Because I think that's still asphalt shingles.
This is, there's two sections that could be done. We opted just to do this section. That's not included in that
Okay.
section. This is more the flat deck around the air conditioning systems.
I remember the number was really high. Is there a reason why it seemed like, I was like surprised because it seemed like a lot of money for a flat, is it still a large?
It's still that same system that we're
Okay.
putting on, and it's a more expensive system, but we're expecting 40 years.
Oh, okay, so this is not like asphalt where we're gonna rip it off or put another layer on. We're expecting,
Term.
40
As long as
years.
that building, we need that building, we're expecting this roof to
So hopefully the
last.
roof will outlast the building, because knowing how Fleischman is. Okay. Okay, that's it. That's my question.
Anybody else have questions? Okay, Mr. Gaynor?
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Thanks,
Mr. Zucker?
Yes.
Mr. Posh?
Yes.
Mr. Register?
Yes.
Mr. Silverman?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Beckett. Okay, we move on to item 3C, finance. Can I take them together? All right, I need a motion for items 3C, 1 and 2.
So moved.
Second.
All right, questions, comments? Scott, do you have anything you want to tell us? or-
Just that fortunately, we had one meeting left before the end of the fiscal year because the state chose to hold our cafeteria reimbursements until after the end of the fiscal year because I'm not sure what the issue was on their end, but it required us to advance $300,000 into the cafeteria fund because we can't end the fund with a deficit. And then we'll return the advance when we should have that money in July. But
So
this
good.
is both approving that advance and then modifying the final appropriations to accommodate this.
So we essentially have a deficit of 300,000 in the cafeteria fund.
Correct. Which is federal reimbursements that flow through the
Right.
state that we should get back, but there was a timing issue with the May reimbursement. And I think what happened was the state probably cut off their checks earlier. We've done that before.
So does this cover June as well?
Yes, May and June.
Okay.
Reimbursements here.
But they're not contesting it. This
No.
is just a timing.
No, just a timing issue.
Do you know when the money will come in?
They tell me that it should be the second week of July. So we'll, and then you will see the return of those advances, both, what those will come to you as an approval item and in 5-year forecast. You'll see.
Don't we have net 30-day terms or something?
Not with ODE.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay, Mr. Gaynor?
Mr. Zucker?
Yes.
Mr. Posh?
Yes.
Mr. Register?
Yes.
Mr. Silverman?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to the main meat of the work session, the board policies, and I'll just turn it over to
Yep.
the superintendent.
Okay, so tonight we're going to start our policy review. So we know it's tradition, we do 3 readings of our board policies. So tonight, Paul Lombardo is going to take us through the policies that we are recommending for revisions, change, new, et cetera. And so, and remember, we're going to come back 2 more times, and he would kind of have a process in place. If we have any questions or concerns, we will be writing those questions and suggestions down as we go to bring back the next meeting. Okay, so I turn over to Paul.
All right, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Now, I'm excited about board policies. I really am. I really get into board.
Only one?
No, I think the board would be excited as well about board policies. In all honesty, as you know, this is one of the most important jobs of a board is to establish policies. And we did a vetting of all our policies, and you'll see we have 53 here in your packet that we're going to be looking at. I kind of want to give you a quick overview of where the policies come from, how they're vetted, and how they get to the point where we're now presenting them to you. So we use Neola. Now, I know we like to use acronyms, so I called Neola to find out. They were previously known as Northeast Ohio Learning Associates. But it's interesting to know that they don't call themselves that anymore because they deal with 7 other states. So Neola is just Neola. It doesn't stand for anything but Neola. And what they do is they hire, and I'll take you through this, they provide districts with a complete service of updating the board policies, administrative guidelines, forms, staff handbooks, and so forth. And it's a very good organization. I have a contact person that comes out, works with me on the policies, if I have any questions. And also, everything is done electronically now. So there is a VPN, a virtual private network, that Dr. Dixon and I have access to. So when new policies come in and they're vetted through legal, Neola sends them out to all the districts that work with Neola into our electronic filing. And then what we do is we take those and wherever they apply in the school district, either at services, if it's a business, it goes to business, human resources, and then we'll go through those recommendations from Neola, and then we talk with Dr. Dixon about that, and then we bring them onto the board for the 3 readings. So that really is the process of how it gets to you.
Well, just a quick question. They talk about not only doing our policies, but they've got things like staff handbooks, student parent handbooks. Do they do that stuff too? Have we been using them for that?
We haven't used them for that, but we have used them for board policies. We are using them for our administrative guidelines and the forms. So there are certain forms that are attached to certain policies, and you'll see that they're referenced in each policy form with a number, and those are also vetted through Neola.
So the staff handbooks, for example, are done internally?
In this district, currently they are, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, since you were already stopped, I apologize, but you mentioned being vetted through legal. Who does the vetting through legal? Does Neola vet through legal, or do we vet through legal?
Yeah, Neola does vet through legal.
Then
And
if
then
we make
they,
changes,
and then if we make changes, if we make specific changes, we can either send them to Neola or we'll use our legal counsel.
okay, but they are duly vetted through legal.
Absolutely,
Thank you.
yes.
And that would be included, if we send something back, that would be included in our fee? I mean, we can go back and forth?
Well,
with them
actually,
on-
the fee is it's no more than $3,000 a year for their service. And they provide all the legal updates, which is very reasonable.
So even if we have to go back to them, we don't pay more?
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Yeah, but they're giving you advice on their policies. If we come up with our own policy, it's not like we can give it to them and they rewrite it and they come up with a legal opinion on it. And this is really their forms.
Yeah, this is their forms. What we would do is I would contact Neola to see if they have a policy that aligns with what we're trying to do here. And then we look at those policies, and we look to see if it's close to what we're looking at or what we're looking for in our policy. If not, then we'll send it to our legal counsel. Okay, and keeping up with Neola, they do send 2 regular updates. They send one in January and one in the summertime. But there are some special editions that they do send out. For example, the guidance counselors will be starting an evaluation system that a board has to adopt policy by September 30th. We just received that at the end of May, so we'll be bringing you one more policy for a 3 reading for our guidance counselors. They've been working on that this year, and they released that late for this reading. So we'll be bringing something back to you in July, which is the guidance counselor evaluation system. And that system is aligned to the teacher's evaluation, the Ohio teacher system, which is the OTES evaluation. Okay, so they will do 2, they'll send us 2 packets of change policies, and then once in a while they'll throw in a special one to let us know if a law changes or something does come up. Okay. All right, so what I thought we would do, because we have so many policies, they're broken down into sections. So what I thought I would do is throw up the first section, and then what I'll do is with my highlighter, if you have questions, I will highlight. If you can just let me know what policy and what page number and a question you might have. I'll make notes. If we can answer them now with some of the administrators that are here, we'll be happy to do that. If not, I'll compile those and make sure that you get an answer to those before the second reading. And if that works for everyone, we can go in that direction. Okay? That works? All right, well, the first category is administration, and you'll look, that's in your first one. They're 1,000s. We have 4 policies. And before we get there, I do want to go over our categories because that might be a little confusing. I did put a key at the front page in your packet, but Neola, there's revised policies, which means that there were federal and state or government changes, that Neola revised a policy that was already in place, sent those revisions to us. There's a new policy, which means it's a first draft of a policy, so Neola's never had that policy, but a law changed and they put a new policy together. An updated policy would be a district-initiated review. At the beginning of the year, I did ask Neola for all the policies that they have and the dates that they were, the most recent date. What I did is I went through all our policies to find, to see if we were updated on every policy. So we did a audit of all our policies. So if we found that we didn't have one that Neola had, then that would be a update, that would be an added policy. An updated policy would be one that was generated internally that we wanted to look at and maybe change some language on. So there's 4 different categories, and I try to put those in front of each policy, okay? So Section 1, Administration, we have 4 policies, and I'll just open up the floor. If you have some questions on those policies, we will address them, and then we'll go on to the next section of the policies.
So for the first policy, we have racial equity, educational equity. So I want to take one past that, please, and this one is for you, Cal. What I've done, there were some questions. If you take the top of that, please. One each. So what I've done is updated your.
I have 3.
Yeah. Pass.
Yeah, pass them.
Yeah.
And you need one more.
That's why.
Yes.
She's getting it.
Okay.
So what I've done is updated your copy that you had in your notebook. And with this new policy, we did not, Neola did not have a policy currently for educational equity. So we went through several districts. If you look in open your book and you have a spreadsheet, and what I've done, we're at MSAN district, and so what we put together, compile, here are all the MSAN districts, and we have a key to the side, and it states that if this district currently, if it has a board policy on equity, if it has professional development in place on equity, a committee or a task force, only an MSAN district, if it has directors or departments or offices on equity, or if equity is mentioned outside of policies. And at the end of that, it's on the sheet here, It has at the very end a summary with the schools that have an equity policy or something. So you would see some school districts, MSAN districts, if they don't have an equity policy, they have an office that deals specifically with equity. So I wanted that was a question that came, and I wanted to provide that information for you. And also, you would see sample equity policies in your packet. And at the very top of that is Cincinnati School District. So Cincinnati School District just recently adopted an equity policy, and as of April, this past April. And then the document behind it is actually a board resolution, the Cincinnati Public Schools did as well as some other districts' policies that are here too. The policy that we chose to give you as example is the one that you have in your notebook that we took from Portland schools. And remember, these are just sample policies that we're looking at. If there's some language that we believe that we're not comfortable with or we need to change, but it's important, I believe, that we really adopt this policy to follow along with our strategic plan goal 2, objective 3, in which we stated that we will look at our policies and implementations of our policies and our procedures. I did change the document on the second page where it talked about what educational equity means. I actually took our definition that's in red that is highlighted in our strategic plan, because remember, we specifically define educational equity. So that language in red is our district's definition that we adopted in our strategic plan. And then below it, they highlight the board will establish the following goals. I took the time to put our strategic plan goals, because I wanted you to see that our strategic plan goals actually align with the goals that they have spelled out in their plan. And actually, we've done some rewording of these to try to closely align this with our procedures. And then at the third page, highlighted in yellow, it said the superintendent will present to the board with a plan to implement goals A through F within 3 months of adoption of this policy. And then thereafter, the superintendent will report on progress towards these goals at least twice a year and will provide the board with updated action plans each year. Again, we still have opportunity to come up with some further plans of how we're going to implement these goals. Majority of them are actually outlined in the strategic plan that I have highlighted here. So if you have some additional questions, again, this language, we can always go through and change some of the language if we feel this language is not exactly what we want to highlight, and really take and adopt some of the language that some of the other school districts have done. You can take an opportunity to look at that, and again, we can address it now, or if you want to take some more time to look at this and digest it and send me some emails, that would be appropriate as well. But again, if we go back to our strategic plan goal 2, we stated there that we will look at equity, we will look at our policies and procedures, and currently we don't have any policies in place, and some of the procedures, we don't have procedures in place. We are MSAN district, which is a network of other districts that are looking at our practices and some of the procedures, but I believe, and our Ed Services team and others believe that this would give us an opportunity to really tell and state how important this is to our district, and looking through things through an equity lens. And this little blue sheet kind of put here, just kind of a little note I saw, it talked about when we're making decisions, what does it mean? You ask certain questions. Does this decision align with the district mission and vision? Whom does this decision affect both positively and negatively? Does the decision being made ignore or worsen existing disparities or produce other unintended consequences? Are those being affected by the decision included in the process? What other possibilities were explored? Is the decision outcome sustainable? So again, when we're looking through equity lens, it's our hiring procedures, is how we are distributing funding or monies equitable to different schools. It's a lot of lenses that we have to look through equity. And I believe this policy would say to the community that the board is serious about equity and they are asking questions. The superintendent, I am updating the board at least twice a year on how well we're doing, implementing this goal. And I really think this is an opportunity for us to make a strong stance about equity in this district. And we have a lot of information to go back and look at if you so
And
choose.
I've got some questions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, conceptually, your vision behind this and the anecdotal examples that you've provided in the past, like the number of kids in our district that are not offered AP or AP classes aren't discussed with them, for example, and they should be. I mean, that's all phenomenal work, and it's what we would expect,
Right.
from our staff. What does this do? I mean, I'm a little worried about like hiring and the staff ramifications, since we're so limited in what we're able to do because of our negotiated agreements. I mean, let's say you don't have, literally enough black teachers in one building versus another building, or you've got teachers that are too old in one building versus young in the other building. It almost seems like in order to implement the way that this is wording, we would need to discriminate against some teachers.
Right.
Or people can call us on that. I mean,
Yeah. No. The intent is for us to ensure that we are looking at all of those. So, for example, during our strategic planning process, Emma Zordan stated one of our sessions, she said, why don't we have any teachers in our district that look like me?
Yeah.
Very valid question. We didn't have an answer for it. So does that mean that we're not looking at different teachers from different backgrounds to put in front of our kids that look like them? Are we being intentional? Are we recruiting? We had no answer for her. So it doesn't say that we're going to discriminate against any group of people, but it's going to say that we recognize that we serve a population of students that maybe look different in other places, and we can be more intentional about possibly recruiting teachers who are well qualified to teach in those subjects. And if we can get them to come to our district, it would be a value add, but not that we are excluding or any other teacher because they don't represent what we may want them to represent. So by no means we're going to put any practice in place that's going to allow us to discriminate on any person.
We can't.
We can't.
Yeah.
Right. It's
And I know
illegal.
that's not the intent.
Right.
I know that.
Right. And if the verbiage is worded that way, then definitely we're going to look at that and make sure it.
Well, I think
That's
it does need to be looked at.
Yeah. And again, that is a sample that we used from another district, from Portland, Oregon, that we looked at, and we thought that it really had some strong points here that we could use as a sample. But again, that is not, we can always tweak and get the policy to align to what we believe is best for our district.
Well, I would appreciate it if you can look at that.
Yes.
That's a huge concern of mine.
Okay.
And earlier on in this meeting, we voted to move 2 teachers and put them as your instructional
Right.
specialists,
Mhm.
okay? Phenomenal teachers,
Yes.
okay? Great teachers. They don't look like Emma Zordan, though.
Right.
So what does that do
Right.
to us?
Right.
When you have 2 teachers that, by merit alone, I would think would be entitled is not the word I want to use, but that
Right.
came out of my mouth, but
Yeah.
qualify for that job. I mean, maybe we have other teachers. I mean, how do you, when you start codifying policy, I think it gives others a reason to say, hey, look, I'm part of a, statistically, there's more people like me in this district, and there's not enough people at the board to fill these positions. That job should be mine.
Right.
Right. And
Right,
I'm
and that's
worried
one
about
way,
that.
but I think it's more important for us to say, the board recognized that we need to look, and maybe we need to recruit for more male teachers in our elementary schools, because we don't have very many. Maybe we need to make sure that we are not hiring more females and less males. But the board is asking those questions because we have a process in place that allow us to look at it through that lens. I think this is what this policy does.
What does this do for our facilities? We're embarking on a middle school process. I think when you look at the two middle schools right now, the Monticello building, now, in my opinion, is a far superior building than the Roxborough building. And I can justify that in many different ways.
Right.
You can say that the kids that are attending Monticello are in a better building. Are they more privileged than the kids that are attending Roxborough? And there's no way, with the way that I suspect our project is going to run, we'll be able to make up some differences here and there.
Right.
But still, people are going to feel that there's inequity in those buildings, just unless you actually make two identical buildings
Right.
that look the same, that have the same hallways, that have the same corridor. And we can't afford that.
Right. I think a lot of that, it's been my experience being here, is that the perceived inequities. So and some of that has been some of our own practices. So for example, when we look at our teachers, when we had our recent layoff, the majority of our teachers that were laid off were from certain schools. So why is that? Why is the majority of the teachers that were laid off were from our schools that had the most need? It's because we have our more experienced teachers at our schools that are achieving. Well, how did that happen? It had to happen somehow. So we look at our practices. We had one particular building last year that the majority of our teachers who were maybe not evaluated effectively were traditionally have been sent to this particular school. So when I did my research, they were right. So those are some of our own practices. When we look at why do we have preschools at certain buildings and preschools at other buildings. So it helps us look through a lens to see what are some of our own practices and beliefs about what kids need. Where do we need preschools? Where do we need foreign language classes? So all of those things can happen when we're intentional about looking at the data and finding out what does the data suggest that we need to close some gaps with funding. How are we getting our general fund dollars? Are we giving school A more money than school B? Why? Why is that? And then what is that formula that we're looking at? Scotty and I have a meeting. We're talking about, what's that model, that formula that we're using when we're giving general funds to our different buildings? We have buildings that are receive grant funds. So how do we make a decision when what schools get grant funds and how much so all of it's formulaic, but it's based on the populations of those students in those buildings. So some of the practices we've done to ourselves because we've not been intentional about looking through equity through different lenses. And that's why during the strategic plan, it was overwhelming last year, our first year, when the reason we have an equity goal is because the community wanted an equity goal. They were adamant about an equity goal.
Go ahead.
I'll piggyback on Jim's. I'm extremely uncomfortable. Well, to be honest, in reading these other ones, I actually like most of these other ones compared to this one.
And again, as I stated before, Eric, the language we can always go
Right,
back
yeah.
and take out. So
because these other ones, these other ones, and it goes back to actually, and I'll come back to what I was going to piggyback. What I like, almost all the other ones, it's an equity plan, except for this one where it's a racial educational equity. I'm uncomfortable
with the word race.
If we're talking about equity, the history of inequities and perceptions in this district goes back before we used to have the rich junior high, we had the middle-class junior high, and then we had the Jewish junior high. So the perceptions in inequity.
This goes back a long time.
Exactly.
This is way before any of us.
The perception of Roxborough being manna from heaven and Monticello being horrible has to do with perceptions that predate demographics even being an issue, I should say racial demographics being an issue. And I have to use a short little story. Years ago, assistant superintendent was talking to me, and she asked what junior high I went to. And she goes, "Oh, you went to Wiley, didn't you?" And I'm like, "No." She assumed I went to Wiley because of my last name. So then she goes, "Oh, you went to Roxborough because I'm white." I was like, "No." So here we have the African-American assistant superintendent assuming, because I'm Eric Silverman, that ignoring what so she assumed, naturally, the same way one of my colleagues in the 90s was said, you know, you're a Jew north of Mayfield. People don't know what to make of you. So to me, if we're talking are we talking equity or are we talking racial equity? So I actually prefer, when we're talking equity, it's resource allocation. And to Jim's point.
Well, I think that's where we have to be cautious of, because it's more than resource allocation, Eric. And I think when we had our AVID and our MSAN students speak, I think they spoke volumes. And the reason why we have that equal opportunity grant is because we saw that we had African-American students who were not even encouraged to take AP classes. That was happening with our own teachers, and our adults was doing that. So now we have to make sure that we provide those opportunities for all of our students, so our students aren't afraid. Right now we have 30 students that are taking an AP camp this summer.
Right.
Okay, it's maybe not where we want it, but I think it's 30 more than we had before.
Mm-hmm.
And because we've identified those students, African-American students, who we know that can take AP courses, and we're giving them a head start. But we did that through that grant. We were able to go through and put some systems in place to identify those students to say, you can take these courses. We believe in you that you can take more rigor. We had to be intentional about that, Eric, to make sure that happened. That wouldn't have happened it wouldn't have happened otherwise.
I don't have an issue with that. I've said to you in private, is that if we have staff members who are, I won't say steering, if we have staff members who are encouraging some students to take AP classes and other students not to, I want to know who those folks are, because I don't tolerate that crap. But so the issue ends up being, I don't have a problem. Let me go to the issue with Jim here. On Jim's, not issue with Jim, but Jim's point. The item D here, to strive to have our teacher and administrative workforce reflect the diversity of our student body. What does that mean?
Means exactly.
Well, no, I guess okay, let me
I think personally we should go over this and come back, read it, and come back to it.
I would agree, because I like these. I hate to say it, in skimming these, I actually liked almost all of these over the one we have here. And most of these, I'm reading, I'm like, okay, this one's, I'd have no problem with it. A lot of these, I could probably say, boom, I'm good to go tomorrow with those.
Well, good. So, and that's good. I mean, the point is, I believe we need an equity policy.
Yes.
Which policy we choose is one we have to be comfortable with, that we implement. So that's why you were giving several samples. We believe that the one from Portland was the one that really spoke volumes, but it may be too aggressive, maybe. Maybe the wording is not what we want, but it's our policy. So we adopt a policy that we're comfortable with. We put the checks and balances in place that the board wants to see. Let's come back with the data, the plan. I still think that another part that I like about the Portland policy is that last piece that you hold the superintendent responsible for giving the updates. I think that's very important, that we don't just adopt a policy for the sake of adopting a policy, that we are intentional about it. We're coming back with updates. Part of that is in our strategic plan goal 2. I mean, Ms. Sandy Womack is the leader of that particular goal. So those pieces and places, I mean, we are very intentional maybe of how the board asks for feedback on those goals. Part of that too, I put in there is in goal 4, that we talked about some of the hiring practices that's outlined there as well as strategic plan goal 1, our educational outcomes. So again, let's read it, let's get some language you feel comfortable with, and we'll come back and put something in place based on that language, and we'll bring that back for you prior to the second reading.
We give Mr. Register a chance
Well,
to say something.
I think we better figure out what that process is, because you could have 5 different commentaries on what the language needs to be. So I think we want to do that. I probably got about 3 things. One is that we say that we're going to, I'm not sure what it means to have every student by name meet or exceed academic standards. Does that mean when our students come in, that we're going to have a plan that then we identify in relationship to these pathways that we might create? I mean, how does that, I guess I'm okay. So each student will probably have an identified plan that we're working with, and that students would potentially be grouped. Would we be, you said multiple pathways, and I'm wondering, if we've got 5,400 students, we're not going to have 5,400 different pathways, I don't think, are we? I'm just trying to reconcile the idea that we have the individual student and how we talk about these pathways at the same time.
Good afternoon, you guys.
Good afternoon.
So, thank you for the opportunity, and I can answer a couple of the questions. I'll refer first to the one that you mentioned, Mr. Register. Right now, every building principal has what's called a building level action plan. It's part of their school continuous improvement plan, which aligns with the Ohio Department of Education decision framework and our CCIP plan. In every last one of those plans, we start off with looking at the achievement gaps in regards to what goes on. So every building principal identifies what we call priority list students. Those priority list students are students who right now have significant achievement gaps based on everything else that's going on in the district. Now, that does not disqualify every other student in the building. They have academic plans and goals as well. But every principal right now in every building, and even at the high school, we have what's called an academic watch list, or a watch list of students. So these are students who are on the radar that right now we know we have significant gaps with. And we put plans in place in order to deal with that, whether that be front loading, I mean, that these students get the information ahead of time so that therefore when they go into the class, they're getting twice as much, or that may mean those students get remediation assistance, which means they're getting it twice a day. But we identify every student. For those students who are doing extremely well, we try to get those students on the track in order to take an Algebra 1 class at the middle school level, or to take a geometry class. So there are programs in place throughout the district in order to put faces with these names. So we don't just have a list of names, that there are faces that we can personally identify with at every one of the buildings. So the teachers, the students, the TBTs, the BLTs are able to sit back and go through in the TBT process to look at where are our students moving, our groups, how are they moving? And that does based on almost every individual student in the school.
Okay, so if we were to think about putting our goals in place, so we would think that the way we are doing this actually is going to impact our achievement gap.
Absolutely.
So when we get a report, so when we get a report from you, we would be talking specifically about the achievement gap and the kind of progress or lack thereof that we've made.
Yeah, but we should be talking about that anyway.
I know.
But
I'm thinking about it from a policy standpoint and what we as a board can expect to see. I'm not trying to operate the district. I'm just trying to see what I'm going to see in terms of the action plan. But maybe it's the action plan that comes first, and then I can have a better idea of what we're looking at.
right, because part of it is our buildings must know our kids. And if you know our kids, then you know the success of the ones that are being successful and the ones that are not being successful. So part of it is administrative regulations. So we're saying to our buildings, here's your list of your students that you have. You have 300 students. How many of your students are not achieving? They have 50 that are not achieving. Why are those 50 not achieving? Who are those 50? So you can walk in the buildings now and you ask for their data notebooks, and right now they can pull their notebooks and tell you who in their buildings are achieving and who the ones that are not achieving. So you're putting that, as Sandy stated, you're putting that face on the data. And so now you're able to look at equity through a tighter lens, a more focused lens. So I think the way that we present it to you, it's not going to look different than what we present. I mean, we may present, we're going to present more often, but I think the way it's actualized in the buildings, it's going to make sure the building principals and the teachers are really looking at their kids and really looking at their data so that we are able to prevent a lot of these inequities from happening early on.
And Mr. Registrar, it also goes back to the point that you made when you sent the information to your Ohio Department of Education in regards to payments for charter schools or Ed Choice vouchers, et cetera. One of the reasons that we find ourselves in the situation we are is that we have significant achievement gaps between subgroups. And if we're able to get an A on value added, as well as an A or B on a performance index, which is incorporating subgroups, then we come off of Ed Choice status. So what Dr. Dixon did to a certain extent, not just this equity policy, is put programs in place in order to say, here's what we need to do in order to get our schools off of this list. By closing those gaps, that increases your performance index. When you increase your performance index, we're already getting value added. Then therefore, we're able to increase that to an A or B level. Those 5 schools that we have on Ed Choice, and we got this information from Sue Cosmo from the Ohio Department of Education just yesterday. An A or B on your performance index and an A or B on your value added takes you off of Ed Choice.
Right.
If we can use this information, using the things we're talking about with equity, in order to approach those students on a name-by-name and face-by-face basis, that takes 5 of our schools off of the Ed Choice status. And so therefore, we have more resources to use throughout the district, potentially when we look at what it looks like with equitable staffing and things of that nature as well, too.
Okay. The second thing I was curious about is the equitable distribution of staff and use the number of years of experience as one example of that. Do we have some data? Do we have baseline data on that now? I mean, do we know, for example, how close we are to that? And okay, so when we come up, if we stay with this 3-month plan, then maybe we should have some baseline data as well. And then the final thing I had was a little footnote at the bottom that the last part of that quote is not exactly.
Oh, yeah. Check that teacher diversity book.
We need to get that quote correct.
Others on this? Go ahead.
Well, you haven't asked, I've got an overreaching comment, but you haven't asked your questions.
Go ahead, you can go with your, go ahead. you're fine.
Okay, so it's, one of the PTA co-presidents I've had, kept on throwing this out there. And it's like, we want to be the best minority majority, or majority-minority district out there, and just be known for that. And I think that's an important statement to make. I see where you're trying to head with this, and I think it's really, really great. I mean, what I'm worried about, though, is in order to implement this, do other initiatives take a back seat? I mean, for example, in order to get the kids up to close the gap, you have like the M-SPAN programs or Avid, okay? And those kids are thriving, they're doing well. I mean, are we going to ignore those kids in order to bring up kids that need to be brought up? Or do we dilute the kids on the end so we have more kids in the middle? I mean, so how do you prioritize?
One, we don't need this policy to do that. We don't need this policy to do that, because we're going to do that anyway. I mean, that's why I've changed the org chart so we can make sure that we have intentional focus on the things that we need to focus on. And that's why I made Sandy Womack the Director of Principal Leadership, to give our principals additional support and make sure that they're doing just what he described. What this provides, I believe, it shows that we are serious about looking at equity and about our practices and about putting procedures and a framework in place to address what we've known. It's almost like the elephant in the room. I mean, we have some inequities that we have not addressed, in my estimation, in a very strategic manner. We are part of this MCN network. I go to governing board meetings. We have Allison Bird and Octavia Reed that are part of this, this research practitioners group. We send our students to a MCN conference. Are we really, really serious about equity? You know, that we have little spurts, but are we really, really addressing it? Someone may ask, well, how well are these students doing? Or how well are those students doing? And then we answer the questions. But we really have no framework behind this is what we're going to do, and the board is going to hold us accountable. We have the goals. We've made some great strides. We adopted that strategic plan that clearly outlines an equity goal. We defined for our district what educational equity is. I think the next step would be to adopt a policy, but we may not be ready to adopt a policy. And if we're not ready to adopt a policy, I say let's do it when we're ready to do it. I do not want us in any way to rush and adopt something that we're not comfortable with. And we're not going to hold this district, me as a superintendent, accountable for making sure that we're upholding that policy. I don't want us to do that. If we need to go back and look at some other things, if we need to get some research teams, whatever we need to do to get this right, I want us to do it right. But if we have too many questions right now we're not comfortable with, let's not move forward with it if we're not comfortable with it. It doesn't mean that we don't want it. It just suggests that maybe we need to do a little more research to align it more to we have a goal. We have a strategic plan goal. We have an equity goal. It's here. We have a definition that's here. So maybe we need to do some other things. We have some districts who've done it, and I'm sure they've not done it overnight. Maybe, so we can slow down and maybe do some more research and answer more questions before we move forward on this. If the board, you guys have to be comfortable about the direction of any policies.
I don't think I don't think you want to slow down.
Okay.
I think I would not encourage you to slow down. You got a problem. You're seeing.
Right.
You're looking for solutions, and a policy should give you teeth.
Exactly.
And a tool
Exactly.
to implement this.
Right.
And work with, for example, those that negotiate the labor agreements that we've got in place.
Right. Right.
The issue, though, is we have high-performing kids who are white, who are black,
Right.
and those kids are thriving in this district.
Right.
You got some great programs right now where kids who have sort of, I love hearing the stories where we see a kid, a freshman kid that's there and says, I was failing in ninth grade and I've rethought where I'm at, and look where I'm at today.
Right.
I've got a scholarship to go to the Air Force Academy, and it's got
Oh, yeah.
bring tears to your eyes, okay?
Right.
That stuff is phenomenal, okay? Those are great stories, but those are sort of kids that are now high achievers.
Yeah.
And even, I can't use names, but you used her name before, violinist, phenomenal. She was part of your strategic planning process, but we've got so many great kids
Right.
Who are high achievers because they've sort of moved through the system. I'd like to be known for a district, if you stick with us for X amount of time, yeah, we've got it figured out, you're gonna come, you're gonna be on top. And I don't think it matters what color your skin is. I just don't think it matters. Because I think when you come in here and people are equal, you can get any kid up, and you can succeed. I just don't want to see the high performers that are already there suffer.
Right.
To implement this. And I know you can't say that, but when you put this much emphasis on a policy, it almost seems like something has to give in order to implement this. And I just think we need to work harder to get everybody out.
Yeah, I kind of, I kind of disagree with you.
Okay.
I think the idea that we have students that we have been supporting in terms of their high performance, my sense of it is we know how to do that, and we would continue to do what we know how to do. There would be no reason for us to stop doing it, and there would be no reason for us to take resources away from the things that have gotten us there. What I think the issue is how do we get the resources to those other students who are not there to get them there? So I don't think it's a dumbing down. I think it's a smartening up. So that's how I see it. And I guess the other thing, there are two other things I would say. One, I think that it's probably important in my mind that we talk about it in terms of race, because what we have seen in this district has been directly related to race. And I think for us to make a statement about race is an important statement that needs to be made, and is not just simply within the school district, but it has something to do with the community that we're in as well. And I think we ought to be bold enough to take the step to say, yeah, we're going to put a stake in the ground around this issue, and let's go for it. And we need the community to follow our lead on that. So that's my opinion on it. The second thing is, I think in the last paragraph, I think that we want to hold the superintendent responsible. The superintendent should hold the central and school leadership staff responsible. So I think as a policy, we should make that adjustment. The other thing is, I'm not sure who walks around in this community and says, well, let me look at your policies. Every now and then we have people thinking about and looking at policies, but I don't think there's an overemphasis on, people saying, well, where's the policy related to this? Every now and then I hear somebody raise an issue around policy. I just don't think that's walking down the street, our parents and everybody else. I don't think they're looking at our policy, but they'll look at this one, which I think is a good thing.
So I just have a few things after all the discussion. One, I just vis-a-vis the discussion we had with Mr. Lombardo earlier, since this isn't a Neola policy, we would want to be sure we vet it through legal, and that's just something we need to do on all policies. I struggle with in all our policy discussions between the difference between what belongs in policy and what belongs in administrative guidelines. So as we're looking through this, to me, policy, there are certain things that belong in policy, but in terms of the action of those, of what happens and how we implement policy, probably belong more in administrative guidelines. So, and again, I'm not criticizing anything that's here, nor am I, it's just something we need to think about as we look at the policy. If I look at some of what was in the policy that was presented, it's somewhat short-term. In this number of months, we'll do this and this. That, if you want a robust policy, possibly what we want is something that could stay as it's written over time, and then the administrative guidelines behind it change. So that's one thing to think about. But I think, sort of summing up what everyone has said here in different ways, I think in their purest form, what policy represents is our values. So in as much as what you're suggesting by having this policy is that this is a core value of ours, I'm supportive of that notion, and we need to find the way to put it into the right words that people can all get behind. I agree with Ron on this in terms of, I do not think this is a matter of dumbing anything down, and that's a terrible phrase, actually. You didn't use it, but I mean, it's a terrible phrase, period. But I think that this district has the ability to keep all the strengths it has right now and implement this policy and make it a stronger district. And I would argue, really, this is a community issue. This is a chance for us to take a leadership role.
Only because I like to muddy waters. One could say, no, there's two components, because it's coming back on what you were saying in regard to Jim's issue about let's say, I don't say luxury programs, but the exemplary programs. One could make the argument and take it to an example that one could say, if we want to truly view this as an equitable allocation of resources, that you're spending a lot of time and money on the music and the arts. And well, you know what? You shouldn't be spending that money on the music and arts. You should be spending it on underperforming students. A logical argument could be made that your resource allocation should go to the students who are most in need, which, on Jim's theory, or Jim's comments, would be, okay, take the money from this and allocate it towards that. And an argument could be made that it could be interpreted that way. And the other one, just because it was introduced and it's right here, and I keep hearing about data. I've repeatedly requested materials in regard to demographic imbalance and demographic achievement at just a handful, and some of these districts are in these equity plans. I'd be very curious to see how do we compare to very comparable systems who have equity plans. Do we have the same disparity in academic performance and student participation as those systems? Because if I'm being asked to examine and implement an equity plan from those systems, and I'm seeing that we're hearing student achievement data from districts across the country reveal similar patterns, well, I haven't seen that data that says how do we compare to systems whom we wish to use comparable equity plans. So I'm frustrated.
I think we have to be really careful. I don't think we should think of this as an equity plan. I think we should think about it as a policy. I think it's basically saying that we believe that there are things that we have to do in order for us to be equitable in terms of educating our populations. It's not a plan yet. It's just a policy.
Well, then if I said plan, I misspoke in nomenclature. My apologies on that. What I'm saying is that, again, I'm very curious to see the systems plans we're examining, because what I'm looking at is I'm basically lazy. What I want us to find out is who's got the secret sauce.
But nobody has the secret sauce, and you are being lazy. There's enough evidence. If you look at the literature, there's enough evidence to say that this is something that school districts across this country is dealing with.
Well, no, when I said I'm lazy, what I'm looking to see is, okay, who's doing?
Nobody's doing better, Eric.
I'm looking for data, and if I'm supposed to sign off on something and support something, then this draft I have reservations on. The majority of these I could sign off tomorrow on. If we're saying this, I need some information that shows how I'm stacking up against other systems, because otherwise I'm operating in a vacuum. And I need something to hold on to. And I know it exists, because in a cursory exam, in my research, in 15 minutes, I was able to find examples. So that's why I'm a little frustrated.
Can I say something? Two things. What I was going to say in regards to the data, Cincinnati is one of the highest performing urban school districts in the state of Ohio. Right now, it has outperformed several suburban districts in regards to where it goes on. So Cincinnati is one of the highest performing urban school districts in the state of Ohio. Their policy and the nomenclature that's listed in there may not be as aggressive as some of the things from Portland, Oregon. Portland, Oregon has had equity policies in place for quite a while. And as a result of it, I looked at the resources in Portland, Oregon, but also looked at MSAN districts as well, too. So, looking at the policy overall, it may take some time for us to figure out which policy actually works. But, I'm a pretty simple man, and my grandfather used to make some things pretty simple to me. He said, son, if you buy a Rolls Royce and they get a flat tire, what you going to do? I'm going to fix the flat tire. The engine is working well. The body looks great. Everything is fine. We're not going to change Abbott or MSAN or MSSP or Power of the Pen or the Science Olympiad or students traveling to different foreign countries in order to be exposed to the AF Press programs. We're not doing that. We want all our kids to do that. We're not decreasing in the arts and all of the above. The one thing we're trying to do is focus on this area that we know that we have some significant deficiencies in. Every building in our district other than Canterbury has an F on gap closing. And our gap closing, in order to decrease those Fs, really, and sometimes it's 30, 35 kids that would close that gap closing number, because each kid makes a difference in regards to what goes on. So those things that are working, MSAN, AVID, those instructional programs, especially AVID instructional framework with Wicker, are things that we want to see all of our buildings use, not just 40 kids here or 40 kids here. We like to see those implemented across all buildings because it sets an expectation for time management, organization, Cornell notes, instructional practices that our teachers can increase and incorporate in their classrooms that will not necessarily say, oh, well, I'm just doing this for a certain demographic of kids. I want it for all of my kids. But as my principals, their responsibility is to say, hey, where are our kids who we know have the greatest need? That flat tire. Because you may have a Rolls-Royce program, but if that tire is flat, it's not going anywhere. We got to get that up to speed. Now the car runs just like it's supposed to. So I'm hoping these are not just short-term, these are actually long-term goals. And the thing about it is this policy is not the only policy. This is fluid.
Okay.
This was just one that adapted and spoke specifically to things that we knew that we had seen with the data that we had in our district, especially with gap closing. Because Canterbury is doing an exceptional job. Second year School of Promise. Roxborough Middle School is a school of momentum, which means they made over 2 years worth of value-added growth is significant. Monticello is a school of momentum, and so is Fairfax Elementary School. They are making significant jumps in academic achievement with all of their subgroups, although that gap closing is still there. So we're trying to find out ways to put things in place. So I don't want Dr. Dixon to take the brunt on this because I was aggressive with the policy. I apologize if I was, but you know, it's fluid.
We're team, Sandy.
It's fluid.
And Eric, I know you've been asking for data, but I think data from other districts does us no service. We know what the data is for our district, and we let our district data guide our practices. So I know you've asked for several, those things, and I think, in your spare time, but I just think that our district data is what guides us. Some of those districts, it may seem like it's easier to get their data. I've talked to several those superintendents about certain data they don't release. They give certain parts. But I think our data, we know enough about our numbers, and we have some experts here that can really show us. We've used some best practices from other districts. That's why we're in the MSAN network. That network gives us best practices to use. We've sent, it's a group, Sandy and Jeff Johnson and Bob Swaggart and some others just returned from an AVID conference last week. The MSAN network was a network that gave me the opportunity to have the EOS opportunity grant. That's where I got that from, the MSAN conference. So that network really gives us an opportunity to look at best practices across from other MSAN districts and use those opportunities to implement things in our district. And one that I hope that possibly that you would see on your sheet, that Madison School District does, they have an Excellence in Equity annual awards that their board actually gives awards to school districts who have shown some advancement towards equity, some equitable practices and stuff. I thought that was pretty neat that they do that. And Madison is one of our MSAN districts.
Please don't get the impression, and I can't speak for everybody here, the concept and the vision that you've laid out, I think we're all in favor of that, okay? In a big, big way. I think the way it's put into words.
Sample that we use from another district is what.
Yeah, so I think that's the
Yeah.
pushback that you
Yeah.
guys are getting, or that you're hearing from Eric and I. And my example that Ron disagreed with was a strict interpretation of the policy.
Right.
I mean, it's not what, I was interpreting what I read in the policy, which is certainly not what, I mean, Ron painted a vision that was different. So I just think that there needs to be some look at this. And
I agree, and I think a lesson, a takeaway from moving forward with other policies that we present, we will bring more examples up front for us to look at before we get to, because what we did, we vetted separate samples and then gave one instead of all of the new policies, potential new policies, samples to you guys to look through before we landed on one final policy.
And as far as Eric and looking at data, I mean, sometimes you can just walk down the slippery slope and, some data is no longer enough data and you need more data to justify the data. I mean, if you folks are using data to justify this, and, Sandy, you used some examples of some of our schools where you're closing the gaps. This is, we have a levy on the ballot, or soon to be on the ballot. One of the things that really resonated with many voters was sort of a statistic that I gotta still think is somewhat valid, where if you're in the district for 3 years, you're at proficiency level. Okay, that is just a really probably too overly simplistic just statement, and I don't know if it applies anymore, but if there's some data that you can present here in a second reading that just sort of helps us get a better idea of some of the success that you're going through, as well as the challenge, because we need this money for the levy to continue these programs. If the levy fails, some of these programs are not going to get continued because we just simply can't afford it. I think if we can see, hey, look, this is where we've made some headway. I want to continually remind everybody that we got straight A's on value add, okay? These are great numbers, and nobody else has done that.
Right.
This would, I think, help the community better understand why it's so important to pass the levy.
Right.
Well, and actually, the irony is, Sandy, you mentioned Cincinnati as an example. I read Cincinnati's plan or policy right here. I'm sorry, I could vote on Cincinnati's equity and excellence in education. I'd vote on this tomorrow. I have no problem with this. The language in here, and the language of most of these, I have no issues with the language whatsoever. So just as this one, I have significant concerns and reservations about the Cincinnati one. Sandy's giving great examples. I'd sign on their policy right here. I could vote on it today.
Gotcha. Okay.
But does that mean you would vote on the resolution as well?
Which resolution?
Cincinnati's resolution.
Where's this?
Behind, right there.
That's right there.
Then I'd have to read that one. I think when I read it, I'd have to look into the details of it. I think I didn't have the same response, as it were, as I did to ours, the proposed one here. I'd have to look at the details on this one.
Okay, so
So just going forward then, in terms of process, you want the board members to send their suggestions, or do you want to give us some new ideas or some modification? How would you like to handle this?
Let me process it through with Sandy,
Okay.
let's talk, and then we'll send an update in the email
So
to
we
you.
want to make sure it
Right, that
preserves
it- right.
what your vision of
Right.
what you're trying to get to us
Right.
as well. Because I think the problem with board members just
Yeah.
putting out, it could go a whole different set of ways. So I
Exactly.
think that's a good
Okay,
place.
okay,
We're all okay with that?
Okay.
Yeah.
okay.
We can
So
move on to
Sandy and
the
I'll
next.
process it, and we'll follow up with the email on what that process will look like.
Okay, so that's one policy. Let's do.
Okay. Well, looking at this section, there are 3 others. Does anyone have any questions over 1520, 1530, or 1630.01? Okay, if not,
just
we...
a quick question. I think it says that we could provide a person with good moral character who meets the requirements set forth by the State Board of Education. What are those?
I'm
Can you
sorry,
say a little bit
where
about
are you?
those? On page 2 of 5, in the second paragraph, the extent.
Is it 1520?
Yeah, 1520, yes. Page 2.
Okay.
It says the second paragraph down, it says that that somebody could be in an alternative administrative specialist. They could be issued a license, I guess, and we could hire them without a license, is my understanding of it, as long as they met these other requirements.
2-year alternative administrative specialist license. There are programs, and I'll have to research this, but there are programs that this can be done for administrators and for teachers, where they're put into a supplemental license, or they can have a substitute license with the understanding that they'll eventually move into a certified licensed area,
CTE, as an example.
or CTE.
CTE is a good example.
So this is a temporary situation.
It's a temporary situation.
If they get a 2-year license, alternative specialist license, I guess,
It's with the assumption that they're going to be moving into that certified, they're going to get that
so
certification.
they got to get the license while they're in that 2 years?
Within their
They couldn't
2 year.
get another 2 year, for example?
No,
Okay.
no.
And that's probably what the law says, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, anything else for that section? All right, programs is the second section. There are 4 policies there, or actually 8 policies, but you'll see 4 up there now. Any of those 8 policies that you have questions on?
I have a question on 2270. It says displays of religious character must conform with policy 8800. I don't see 8800 in my book.
Say that again.
It says conform with policy 8800, but I can't find 8800.
Well, 8800, there's probably not a revision for 8800,
Okay.
so that would be already in our policies.
So this is just the revision handbook.
These are just revision. We have almost 300 policies. So this is just those that were revised or those that were updated.
Can you send me 8800 so I can?
Yeah,
see
it's
what-
on our, all of them are on our website, but I will put it on, I will send it to you. Okay.
On 2260.02, page 1,
Yes.
we have a statement in there that says that this policy does not apply to single-gender schools, but we don't have any of those, do we?
Not now.
No, we don't.
So
No.
I think we should probably take that out of the policy.
Is there a reason to keep it in case we ever did?
I think that since we do this,
Regularly,
on a
understand.
regular
It's a good
basis, I
point.
think
It's a
if
good
we
point.
do, we can do it.
It's a good point.
You don't think we
Okay,
can
so-
slip in a single-sex school without noticing it?
Where is that at?
It's on page 1. It's the last paragraph in the single-gender classes and activities, sort of the introductory piece,
Okay.
second paragraph. And, okay, I got one other thing on that page. I thought maybe we could use unbiased or something like that rather than even-handed. I'm not fond of that even-handed word. I mean, that sounds like, anyway.
Underhanded?
Yeah, actually, Ron, going
Yeah.
back, this policy does not apply to single-gender schools or athletic programs, since you have some.
I had a question about the athletic programs, but I was told that we don't have that situation at present either, but we could. And I think about it in terms of
Girls field hockey team?
potentially any sport, we could have this issue. And right now, what they're saying is that it doesn't apply to athletic programs. In other words, what they're saying, I guess, is women's sports are women's sports and men's sports are men's sports.
Or is
I
it,
think when we get to, we're gonna have to deal with this at some point, so I'm inclined to think that maybe this comes up again next year and we might have to deal with it.
Well, we talked about taking the single gender class out of it. We didn't say the sports activity.
No, I didn't say the
Oh,
sport.
okay.
I didn't say the
We wanna
sports
leave the sport,
activities,
yeah.
but
Right,
there
because-
is an issue
right, there is
around
an
sports
issue that's
activities that
coming
we're
up.
gonna have to deal with at some point.
Agreed.
I mean, I don't know if we're ready to deal with it right now, but, we could.
Right.
From my standpoint, because I think it's gonna be it's an issue.
And there's some other, the state is dealing with that as the transgender, but in those policies, that they are helping districts to come up with the language around those policies.
But you could have a girl on a football team.
True.
Yep, yep.
Well, wait, let me ask a question then. If we have, well, because you don't have one could argue you don't have a women's football team, therefore she wants to, a girl wants to play football, she's on the football team. If you have basketball, if you have a men's and a women's team, the question I would pose then in regard to that, if you have a woman who wants to play on the men's team or vice versa, is that allowed or is that disallowed because you have equity as far as programs? Perhaps I shouldn't use the phrase equity, parity in regard to programs.
My understanding is that if there is a program for female, program for male, that they'd have to go for those teams.
So in Jim's example, it's primarily or the field hockey, it's where you don't have a comparable program for both genders.
That's correct.
Okay.
And just to give you an update on that, Neola policies, they vet these to put this language in, and a revision will only come if the law changes, and that's their recommendations to keep these words in. We can take out the words as you're suggesting. The process would be to vet it again with our legal team just to make sure that we're following the laws and the procedures the way the law says. But we can do that. That's the process, as you asked at the beginning. If we do make changes, we get it vetted again.
Who's the Title IX officer?
District Title IX officer.
Chip Johnson.
Yeah, that would be Dr. Johnston.
Do we know that? I mean, do people know that?
Super knows it.
I know, but
When you look at the discrimination
It's
policy.
in there.
It's in there.
Okay,
It's
right there.
Yeah.
okay.
So you don't have to look it up, it's there.
Right, thank you.
All right, anything else with this section? There are 8 different policies and programs.
Yeah, just on 2271, page 1, the college credit plus, the students have to apply by April 1. I think we should include that in our policy. I think it's in state codes, but I think we ought to have it in our policy somewhere. We say that we have to let them know about it by March 1st, but they also have to apply by April 1st.
Is that the same every year?
Yes. And on the second page of that same section, we still got PSEO in there, and that should be the college credit plus, I believe. On second page, turn the page
Yes,
over.
Third line.
Yeah, third line. And I have a little bit of a recommendation since I've suddenly run into all these administrative guidelines and all that kind of stuff. I think there's a convention around using the revised code language, and I think we always quote it as ORC in terms of our communication, so I would recommend that we do that in our policies as well. Rather than RC, I think we ought to say ORC.
Yeah.
And I haven't figured out what to do with the administrative guidelines yet. But I don't know that we look at those very often, at least I don't.
But actually, we're working now to put those online too, so when you go to the policy, you can
You can
click
see the
on
administrative guidelines,
as
okay.
well.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
the forms, and they'll be able to come up, so you can see the forms, you can see the guidelines.
Okay.
Well, going to, I guess that does beg a question, resource allocation. As to Ron's point, how frequently, you're talking for the district's website for the public to look up any of the policies? Okay, I guess the question I posed then is, how frequently are we have requests for the giant notebook of policy? Because I'm looking at Mr. Wortman and his office. I mean, how much time and effort does it require for us to put all this content online if we're receiving 4 requests a year? I guess,
Yeah.
you see what I'm saying? I mean, it seems like a lot of time and effort that has to be constantly updated if you're only getting a very, very random, or not random, very irregular requests.
So is a question that if it's worth it to put it on the website?
That's why I guess. mean, if
I think it's, quite frankly, we use it quite a bit.
Okay.
I mean, we're always going to it, and it's the most updated version. So after the third reading, this will go to Neola, they'll format it, and then they'll upload it for
Okay,
us
so-
on the
oh,
website.
Oh, okay. got it.
And then
Okay,
with the
that's- okay.
administrative guidelines,
Okay.
they'll do the same thing.
Okay. That's just my concern, and if you're using it if you're using it more as a web-based tool for the district as a whole.
Absolutely.
Versus for public requests. Okay,
Right.
never mind.
But the public can look
And
at
if they're
it
doing
as
all the
well.
work anyway, then fine, so be it. And we're, that's part of what we spend on them anyway.
Correct.
Oh, then sure, go ahead.
Right.
I want to go back to something we brought up, and I'm not prepared to suggest any either changes or anything I saw in here, but Dr. Dixon mentioned that the state is working on, transgender guidelines and that type of thing. I think we need to be we need to be thoughtful about all of our policies that in any way would be exclusionary. And it's not something that we've done in the past, probably as well as we maybe should have. So I think we need to be very thoughtful about that going forward. I'm not prepared tonight to say this isn't, but as Mr. Register brought up the single gender issue, I could see some issues where that could create some real problems. So I think it behooves us to be thoughtful of that going forward. And so as we look as we're looking through policy, if people see things, I think we should be careful about that.
Good. All right, anything else for section 2 here?
Just a quick question. When we think about preschool programs, do we now charge fees based on income? We do?
We've
Okay.
always charged it.
So what do we do? Use the county's guidelines on that, or we have our own?
I
think we use the
I
county,
think
yeah.
it's the county
Right.
guidelines, yeah.
And vouchers.
Okay.
All right. All right, the next section is professional staff, and we have 5 policies. And we'll take questions on any of those.
I think, I don't know if it was here, but we had, at one point, had 2 people, potential people for, as the COs. We
Yes.
just want to, what's our logic for just having one?
Well, and that's a great question. If you notice, and looking at what other districts do, because employees may change, our policy has been can become out of date when you just put a specific person's name.
Right.
But it's generally that position, whoever's in that position, that will take those calls or follow the policy. So it's the recommendation to put the title of the person who would handle that specific situation. So it would either be Dr. Johnston or myself with a lot of these policies on anti-harassment, non-discrimination, and also the Title IX, ADA. Those would all be handled by the Director of Student Services or Director of HR.
And I think, Paul, one of the questions that Mr. Register had was, just in case, I think the recommendation was if it's somebody from each gender. So we may want to look at that again and getting a person of each gender as an alternate,
Well,
just in case, because I think that was spelled out.
And then I guess if we go to 3362, page 8.
Yes.
I guess this is specifically related to anti-harassment and compliance officers, and it actually makes a recommendation that we have 2.
Right.
We do. That is, I've been taking care of all those since I've been here, but we would have to look at another position because it wouldn't be someone in my office. It'd have to be another administrator. So we could, if you want to put, but there's no guarantee that that position will be a female.
Well,
If it-
I'm not sure. I think the idea behind having 2 is reasonable.
Right.
And I guess the question is, if we're just depending on a person, we might be in trouble if somebody's out for an extended period for sick or something like that. I think it's protecting us to have another person that could actually do it. And this recommendation, I know we'll take it out when we finalize the policy, but it does make sense that there would be a second person. To me, it does.
And in fact, I mean, I think the fact that they do of each gender is they're trying to be thoughtful of what the needs would be of the complainant.
And do you want to put a person's name, or do you
Yeah.
want to keep it?
We're gonna add a second person name.
So we would add, and do you want the name or the title? I guess that'd be the question, because I was getting, since Glenda left, we were out of compliant with the board policy because her name was the second person. So that was there for a year and a half, and if people try to contact her, they wouldn't get her because she wasn't here. So I'm trying to think of,
Again, can that be an administrative
Yeah,
guideline where you
we'll
say
talk
as
about
as determined by the superintendent? Or,
Yeah.
And that way, as the names change, the superintendent can change that without changing policy.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
okay.
Can the superintendent always be the backup?
I think that would be overloading the superintendent potentially. wouldn't it?
Well, the superintendent's office, because you have confidential secretary that can help.
Yeah.
It might be that from a policy standpoint, is we could say this position or someone designated by the superintendent or
You're right,
the
exactly.
superintendent, something like that.
Let's
So
have
if
a
we do
second
have a
person.
second
Okay.
person,
Okay.
the superintendent or the superintendent's designated rep or
No,
whatever.
there's a number of these here, so we'll just make sure that we do that for all the policies that applies for.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else with this section 3, professional staff? All right, the next one is classified staff, and you'll see that some of the policies are duplicated here, because one's talking about professional staff, and one's talking about classified staff, but it's a lot of the same language.
Okay.
So there are 9 policy updates in this section.
Okay.
Okay. All right, the next one is students, number 5, and there are 6 policy updates in that section. All right, and then there's section 6, finances, and there are 8 policies in this section.
And I'll just note that Sue Pardee did review all of these in detail, so she's, if you have any questions, I could take those back to her, but she did review this section because they're all related to grants.
Okay.
Or most are, I think, travel reimbursement, reimbursements on that side.
Right.
Okay. All right, section 7 has to do with property, and there are 5 policy updates there.
Do all districts have a real estate disposition policy? I mean, is that pretty standard?
This is a standard Neola policy. Mhm.
Even the okay, so your modifications are their modifications?
Yeah, that's-
Correct.
So they're
yes.
not our modifications?
Right.
Correct.
That's correct.
Right.
Okay, that's,
What is this personal property piece, that under $10,000? What are we talking about? What kind of things are we talking about? I mean, do people have personal property?
It's, no, it's like equipment, that's right.
But is it theirs? I mean,
No, no,
what does
it would be
personal
the
mean?
districts. Basically, I think it's not land or building, it's not a physical property, it's the table, chair, things like that.
Go ahead, George.
It's identified actually under that, you
Yeah,
see
your
where the
second
red's
red
at?
paragraph.
It describes what personal property is. It's anything other than real property.
It actually belongs to the district.
Right.
Yes.
But the terminology,
Could be a desk, could
Okay.
be any type of component like that.
Anything that's, not consumable, I would assume.
Right.
Mostly
No.
equipment.
Books would fall, would textbooks? even?
Textbooks fall in it, yes.
So pretty much just anything but the
Right.
buildings and the land.
Technology.
Computers, too.
Right, computers.
okay.
Okay. 8 is operations, 5 policies there.
Can we go back to
Sure.
73,000, page 5?
Okay.
We have to offer our buildings to community schools if we're going to sell them or get rid of them. Now, that's Ohio Revised Code, I thought. I mean, if I would not want to have to, if it wasn't the, I mean, from what I understand, it's the law.
Correct.
I mean,
But you want to,
But-
you want to
but-
reference ORC, is that what you're saying?
well, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to vote, I mean, I wouldn't want to have to agree to this because I think it's ridiculous, but it's the law and we got to follow it. So, I mean, if there's other references to Ohio Revised Code.
I have a, piggybacking on Jim's question, as I've been doing all evening. I guess the first one would be, high-performing community school is defined by a state law. Anyone know what the state defines as?
They assess community schools each year and make some determinations. Not a good system yet.
So they're not
the bill
drilling
that's
on
going-
themselves. It's-
Well, the bill that's going through, that they're looking at now, tries to establish more accountability and speak more directly to what exactly those are. We don't believe, well, there are some that they would say,
Right.
they would call high performing, but the criteria for high performing is kind of loose.
It's basically the state's criteria and the state law. Okay. The less I say about the state, the better. Then the question I would pose then is, if we have a building and we have a piece of, I don't know if anyone in the room can answer this. We have a building, it sits on land. If we wanted to sell it, we would first have to we have to follow this criteria. The question I would pose is, if we knock the building down and we have just the vacant land, does the same criteria still apply?
Yes.
That's a good question. I would
It
assume
would.
that it does. It's still
It's real
considered
property.
real property.
It's
So as
It's
long
the
as-
building
it's
or the
real
land that
property.
it's sitting
Okay.
on.
But now, let's say we have a building and we have building or land and we have building on land, because can't do it the other way, right? You can't do it without the land. If you wanted to lease it to an entity, the building or the land, for a protracted period of time, would we still have to offer it to a high-performing community school before we offered it a lease to somebody else?
Lease is different than the sale of property.
Okay, so if we wanted to lease it for 50 years to somebody, I didn't know if anyone had a definitive answer,
I think that could get a little
Okay.
tricky. So we would have to seek legal advice in that circumstance, because the intention is if you have a vacant building, that you will offer it to a community school.
Yeah, they would have, even in the lease
I
situation.
think even in a lease
they
situation,
would
we
have-
probably
they
would be
have
obligated to
first
offer
dibs.
something.
if we, to be honest, I would like to have a definitive, I'd like to know the definitive.
Yeah,
place.
we can find that out.
But does that go outside of the district? Does the community school need to be in the district to have first dibs?
Yeah, it
They
That
have
was-
to
that
be
was
in the
always-
district,
yes,
aren't they?
yeah,
So if
correct.
they're outside of the district, we're done, right?
Correct, and there was one, and it's now defunct, so we have no obligations currently. It was Greater Heights Academy, I believe, was the community
you're right.
school.
So then, knowing of the school, the non-public entities we currently have in the CHUH boundaries, there would be there's nobody, even like Jesus down the street or Hebrew Academy, most of, none of them.
Schools, not
Community
Okay, that's what I want to get clarity on. So
Yeah.
basically, at the present time, there is no schools within our boundaries for whom that would apply.
Correct.
Okay.
But we'll get an answer on the lease
I
question.
would be curious, I'd be very curious about that.
Okay.
All right, number 8, operations, 5 policies there.
only because it's on the sheet, and do we have one, do we have a bed bug policy as well? Just because it was I hate that.
Big butt
Do we
policy.
have a big bug? I mean,
Georgia,
well, I hate to ask, but
It sounds like pedicure.
49, yeah. There you go.
I missed the question.
do we have a head lice policy? Do we have a bed bug one?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
It's not actually a policy, it's a procedure.
Okay.
Administrative procedure, but we do have it.
Oh,
It follows the county Board of Health's recommendations.
I know it was a big issue a few years back, so that's, okay.
It still is.
Well, that's,
We-
but you don't hear it in the news anymore, so.
But it is, it's administrative
Okay.
procedure. Okay?
You may have wait for.
we got one more section, so might as well stick around.
It's comfortable up here.
All right, and finally,
Just a question.
sure.
What's the name of, oh, this check means only, okay, so that means only the assistant superintendent. These other things don't apply? These
If it's
other
not checked,
positions?
correct.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Sorry.
No problem. And then relations, 3 policy updates there.
9211, first page, third paragraph. Each support organization must maintain and provide proof of general liability insurance coverage. What exactly do they have to show you or provide you?
That they have
That's what-
insurance coverage. If they
Okay.
want to use one of our facilities, they have to provide a document that
No, when you say
provides-
use the facility, you mean for staging an event, not if they want to have a meeting.
Right.
Okay.
Where is it, where is that?
Right here.
The first page in blue.
Is that, what does that minus mean? I couldn't keep up with the codes. I was thinking that wasn't included.
Oh, it's underlined and it went through there. So that, yeah, that's,
In the checkbox.
In the checkbox, you
It looks
got
like the
a-
checkbox doesn't have an X in it, like you have an X in the
It's-
other ones.
It's a dash.
yeah, that's because the option isn't there anymore. So
Oh,
Neola
okay, so you
did,
eliminate an option.
so it's not an option, it's
Okay.
mandatory to have that there.
Okay.
So basically,
Yeah,
so
no, it's hard to.
if I wanted to reserve the football stadium, I got to show.
Yes, you do.
Okay, but if I'm reaching heights and I want to use this room for a meeting, that doesn't.
They actually have the same responsibility.
Oh, really? So if any outside organization just wants to book a room, they've got to show that they have proof of insurance?
Yes.
Okay.
Do we have any of the people that we take care of?
There are umbrellas.
If you read the policy, it says that,
The PTAs,
so the PTAs are covered by us.
right. They're it's an
Under our
umbrella
policy.
under ours, right.
Okay. What about when we have those community groups that do gardening and stuff like that? Do they have to have independent coverage?
They're volunteering for us.
Yeah, I
They're
think,
not permitting our space, so we don't require it. If an accident occurred, our insurance would have to,
So we think about the Coventry Peace people. Are we covering them?
yes. It's a volunteer group.
All right. Anything else?
Okay, thank you.
So let's just remember the procedure. If you do, this is the first reading, so if there's things that come, that you think of along the way, you read through again, or something we said sparks something, be sure you get information to Dr. Dixon, and then she'll get it to
Right,
whoever needs to hear it.
right, and then as it relates to racial equity, as I stated before, Sandy and I will work on the procedures, next step, and I'll email that out to you guys.
When is your second reading for this?
July 12th.
July 12th.
Next week.
Is there I was unsure if there was a second meeting in July?
The second meeting in July is our retreat.
So we only have 2 meetings in July? Oh, wait. We have a board retreat. We have a meeting on the 12th.
Correct.
We have no, so is the 12th a business meeting or a work session?
Business.
Business.
So we
It's
voted,
4th of July.
well, then, so we don't have a second board meeting in July, because I think the Facilities Accountability Committee is expecting to come to us sometime in July with something. We got facility stuff coming up. I'm
On the
a
12th.
little uncomfortable.
Brad said they're coming on the 12th.
When do we have, when do we, there's just so much stuff, and I hate to have 5-hour meetings. middle school, I guess, July, August, September, we've got middle school presentations, we've got high school discussions. I think maybe we have something. We've got, I guess, Mr. President, would it be valuable for us to have, instead of having a long meeting on the 12th, would it be beneficial for us to have another Tuesday night meeting as opposed to?
Well,
Yeah.
I think what we can just do is look and see what all you feel that we needs to be presented to us. We'll look and see how long that meeting would be. Is it really a 5-hour meeting? Is it a couple hours? Again, FAC will come on the 12th, it sounds like. And, but if there aren't, the summer months are the months when, we have a lot of people take vacations, so we
Well, no,
want to be
it's-
sure that we schedule it when people are available to give us the information we need.
Well, Jim's, just because Jim's out of town doesn't mean,
Yeah.
Well, no, I guess, well, Jim doesn't want to miss July. I guess, if we don't have any presentations, and if it's just FAC and policy, then we should be okay. The question really would be, when do we have Moody Nolan coming to us on?
And you've asked a few
Yeah.
times about the timeline and
Yeah,
making sure that we know,
it's-
and that's a valid point. So
Yeah.
if we could know what we need to do, and if there are things that need to be put in July, then.
And I would actually examine if there's something in August or September, if we can pull it up and put it into July, because we know August and September are going to start getting really crazy.
Well, my biggest concern is the middle schools and a public process involved in it. And it's been alluded to us that there's going to be some conversations in July about the middle schools. Does that give us enough time for this board to look at everything before there's any public process? Like, gives you the 11th.
Brad, can you come up, please?
I don't want to put you on the spot. This is a conversation you guys need to have with Cal, because it seems like there's going to be too much information. Okay, from a selfish perspective, I regret that I'm missing the 12th, okay? I kind of assumed we made the first Tuesday and the third Tuesday, okay? This middle one kind of took me a little off
The
guard.
4th of July.
4th of
Yeah.
July did it.
Well, 4th of July is on a Monday.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you want to meet on the 5th?
Well, it's
Yeah.
a business day, isn't it?
Business, I'm at work.
If it's a non-business day, then not. But, the issue here is, it is what it is. It's been noticed that the meeting's set on the 12th, okay? And, bad me for not being there. But I just don't see how you can possibly fit in a very comprehensive middle school presentation with a FAC presentation, which is going to be highly comprehensive.
Well, let's listen to Mr. Callender.
Well, at this point, when we talk with Moody Nolan and back things up a little bit to give us a little bit of breathing room to step back and make sure we get all of our processes in place, we discussed initially giving the board a look at the POR, the initial POR, some bubble drawings, those kind of things,
Right.
In July.
Right.
And then in August, having a formal presentation at the first meeting with a few weeks for comment, thinking about it, those kind of things. And then the business meeting, have that be set aside primarily for public comment, reflection on those kind of things, and then September, taking the vote. And that was the timeline.
Well, then I guess if we're supposed to see is it bubble drawings that the board would receive, I'm sorry, the board's going to receive the POR from Moody Nolan, or is the board going to have a presentation from Moody Nolan on the POR? Because
It would be a very simplistic version, similar to what we've already seen a little bit of in the Tuesday morning subcommittee type meetings, Thursday morning subcommittee meetings. We're still working through with the building principals and having building principal meetings to get the details nailed down as far as spaces.
Well,
That's not July 12th. We're not going to see the bubble drawings July 12th. That's August.
No, I think you would.
No, you'll get
July 12th.
something on July 12th. You get the initial just, here's the initial drawings, here's the initial layout.
Then right now, we've got 3 big things on the July 12th schedule on top of our regular, the regular stuff we can blow through in 5-10 minutes, maybe, but.
Well, I don't anticipate that being a large thing, other than here is the initial thoughts, take a look at these,
Okay.
kick them around, that kind of thing, and then have some time for you to comment and think about them. And then come back in August for a formal presentation to the entirety of the board.
Well, then I'll flip it around. Oh, then when can Jim and I, when we meet with you folks on Thursday mornings, what Thursday morning can we anticipate getting a preview of the POR before the rest of the board sees the POR?
Whatever works into your schedule.
Can we have it Thursday?
We'll try.
All right.
I'm still working with Mr. McNichols on some of the layouts, on some of those
Well,
things.
just, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously we know it's in flux and it's early, but, you know.
I do have some drawings already.
Okay.
When are you leaving?
The 9th.
Right. So
Okay, it would
the
seem to me.
7th is, July 7th is still a Thursday as well, right?
Yeah.
Is what?
Is a Thursday as well.
And we meet every week.
Right.
So, I mean,
Well,
we try
I
to
mean,
meet.
notice it, and, I mean, if that's an appropriate time to bring everybody in, bring it, I mean, I think that's a great, I mean, I think that's, I mean, it's not like Eric and I need to see the documents before anybody, but I think some of the comments that Eric and I make kind of make it a little bit easier to present to everybody. But, I mean, the issue here is we're sort of on an accelerated timetable. I mean, maybe accelerated is not the right word to use, okay? But I mean, the issue is there's, I think, a lot of feedback this board, all 5 of us, would be itching to give. But I think the bigger issue is it teed up so we have community meetings?
And
Not
that,
just a board meeting where someone could kind of give public comment. I mean, there needs to be a presentation to the community on this is what you're thinking of doing.
and that would be that interim time I see between that August work session and that September vote. That's a time when I see some community involvement things. It's sort of a back to school kind of a thing. I think it would fit really well
Well,
with that.
if the expectation, well, I guess this goes to a process issue, and the question ends up being, okay, if the board sees that there's in our first meeting in August, here, board, here's your presentation, then the question is, then are we supposed to, when do we act on that? When do we act on it? Or, when do we act on it? And then in the interim, are we anticipating another board meeting where we have public comment? Or are we going to have a meeting at Wiley or hopefully an air-conditioned room at Wiley, where we would have a true presentation to the public for public input? I guess in my opinion, there's 2 components. There's a board work session where we have public comment, and then there's a community meeting.
Correct.
So the question is, what are we looking at doing?
Okay, look, think about July.
Okay.
For the first initial
Right.
layout.
Preview.
Get drawings, or preview.
July 12th.
July
Let's use
12th.
dates if we can, yeah.
July 12th. Then the first board meeting in August,
It's not the date.
which would be
Yeah.
Mr. Gainer.
Second, I think.
The 2nd of August?
Yes.
2nd of August would be a presentation by Moody Nolan, formal
Gotcha.
presentation.
Okay.
Then the board itself would have that time, interim time after that formal presentation, until the work session, which would be the second, which would be the 16th.
Okay.
School then starts the 22nd. Between that 16th and the September meeting, which is
Scott? The 6th.
the 6th, that's when I anticipate public meetings.
Okay, so we're looking, again, I'm playing sort of devil's advocate. So what we're saying then is sometime between the second board meeting in August and our first week in September, sometime before the Labor Day holiday, we're anticipating Moody Nolan to entertain come to the sweltering cafeteria at Wiley and hear about okay.
Something like that, but also there's going to be, again, I see some, at the start of school, those kind of things, some sort of the displays at the various schools, at the 2 schools, those kind of things. So there would be some indirect as well.
Well, I guess, well, it's a good idea. Does Mr. Wortman in the audience know that that's that we're planning on?
That's
doing that?
Moody Nolan.
Okay, that's all.
That's on them.
Moody Nolan. Okay. I'm thinking from a parent standpoint of, even though I'm not a parent, even though back-to-school sales begin the 4th of July, it's still going to be right before the holiday weekend, getting your kids into school. I just want to make sure that we're not, we're just going to stick it in and squeeze. We need to make sure people are very well aware of whenever that meeting is. And if we can find it, knowing how Wiley's cafeteria can be, if we can find a more climate-comfortable environment as well, I think would be very useful.
I think the real benefit would be to have something at each one of those buildings.
I think that would be the ideal situation, in my opinion.
They both have wonderful auditoriums.
Yes, they do.
Isn't the Wiley Auditorium air conditioned?
It is.
Yes, it is. board
It's a tough
versus-
room to watch a presentation in, though, with detail because of the depth of it.
Sweltering
So,
cafeteria.
does this meet your expectations?
Yeah, I think that works. The key, what I'd like is, I hate this, and I like everything on one piece of paper, so I know basically where I'm supposed to
And
be.
again, part of that is the, me understanding the calendar for July.
Right.
Because I was working on the assumption that we were on the 5th as well, and so that sort of backed up some of my dates. That's why, when we talked about the retreat today. So those were some of the dates that I got nailed down today, and to share all of that Thursday morning.
And I thought we had a second meeting in July. I didn't know we didn't have a second meeting.
So if you'll, I know we just discussed them, but if you could just send out the dates.
Absolutely.
So that everyone has that timeline. If anyone has issues going forward, or if things change, or whatever. Traditionally, July meetings have been poorly attended by the public, too,
I know.
because people are all on vacation as well. So
there's
in many
two
respects, this gets things back when people are starting to get back in school. That's based on traditional
I,
meeting schedules.
Yeah, but if you have with that in mind, you have a presentation that this is how it's gonna be, and the community doesn't have the opportunity to see it because they're all on vacation.
And that would be the July, probably with July.
Yeah, I get that. But people are gonna complain about August too.
Right, but realize we're out of time on that. I
Yeah,
mean, because
well-
it doesn't matter. It's going to be in the summer.
Well, then maybe we need to get out there as soon as we can with these dates, and just try to get them out. to
I
the
think that's a
network.
good idea, and I think actually Mr. Calendar's idea, or the team's idea, I should say, I'm
Team's
sorry.
idea.
I've just robbed you of an idea, maybe.
I
but,
did not have the idea.
Of having, we'll call them passive, that, I don't want to make it sound, but the displays and things. That actually, in many respects, works better than meetings. We, as you well know, we don't get that many people at these meetings, as many as we say we
Well,
do.
then let's see if we can get them in the library. Display boards in the
No,
library.
And that's part of the, again, I like that, the passive representation here is the renderings. People get used to those, they look at those, they have a chance to chew on them instead of something that's being rolled through slide after slide after slide.
But, yeah, just as long as you know, if you put something out there, it's like, and you have your opportunity to
Right.
show up in this public meeting
Yeah,
to.
I think that's a good idea.
well, and I do like the idea, actually. I think the more I ruminate on it, I think it's better if you were talking about Roxbury, I hate to say it, if the two together would be great, but if you're going to talk about Roxbury and talk about Monticello, I think it almost is better to be in the two specific buildings, and I would highly encourage, this is probably more for Scott Wortman, that it's a middle school, so you want to invite the middle school folks, but I would also let the elementaries know, because they're going to be, if they've got a kid who's matriculating up, and or they're, hey, do I want to deal with the transition, and also, hey, here's what's going to be coming down the pipeline. So I think we do need to make sure that the respective elementary schools in that attendance zone, that they're also informed about that dialogue, because we're talking about continuity, and also that the longer you're in the system, the better you do on our scores. That as well plays into that.
Right, and I was hoping to tap into a lot of the excitement of the start of the school year, too.
Well, okay, so just to throw more feedback for you guys to sort of balance, there's community members out there that thinks it's nuts that we're smashing two middle schools together in one building, but calling them two separate middle schools. Now, I know that there's some operational reasons why that may be necessary, and how that gets pulled off. But, people are going to be wanting answers to that.
And I've stated, when we get those answers, we give them to the public.
Yeah, I know.
But at this time, we have to deal with what we were given, and so we will get through that. But the plan calls for both of those schools to be done simultaneously. And so that's what we're working on, getting a plan together to implement that. And how that's going to be done, we're still working through the plan. So I know there are a lot of rumors out there. So, what we could do is kind of tell people that when the administration gets the plan together, the administration will roll the plan out. But now it's been so flooded with rumors, I just don't want to address the rumors. I want to wait till we get the plan, and then we will put the plan out to the
I guess
public.
my question would be, when will we have a plan? Because I hate this, when I look at what we'll have on the site for Wiley, and I know the Wiley building, to me, I know we're going to run parallel. I view it seems to me, relatively simple or relative, I don't say simple, but it shouldn't be a very complex process, so I'm sort of,
I think
Yeah.
to a person that's not in education, it seems like it's a very simple project, but it's not, Eric. And I think what we need is patience from the public to understand that we're going to do this plan thoughtfully. So again, we inherited that these buildings were going to be done simultaneously with no plan. Okay? So now we're trying to put a plan in place that will lend itself to something that's going to work for all our kids and our staffs. Some people think it's just simple as, oh, just put the kids together for 2 years as one school, and then all of a sudden they become two separate schools. Well, that's a staffing. Why would you want to disrupt your staff? You may not need two separate staff for the number of students you're going to have. So we're working with it. That's why Pat changed the administrative team. So Pat McNichols is going to be the lead. Pat McNichols is going to make sure that we have the right staffing. We're working with the state to make sure that we've been told that in order those schools have to maintain the separate RN numbers. So if that's the case, then we have to have separate schools in that one site. But that doesn't mean that we're going to have everything separate, that we can't share classes, we can't share lunch, share electives. Of course we can still do that. It's just scheduling.
Right.
And with the help of the, Ed Services team, the school and their team, they're going to make sure that we have a space that's going to be viable for both schools. I heard a rumor that, you're going to have separate entrances and kids are not going to be allowed to mingle together. It's like, no, that's not as further from the truth.
well, I guess,
Welcome to
we're
Cleveland Heights.
we're 14 months away from, in 14 months, it's going to go into play. So I guess the question is, if a person comes up to me and says, what's the plan? And I say, I don't know, we're working on it. They go,
Right.
when's it going to be done?
You tell them,
Well, no, I can't tell.
well, you have to, Eric, because we
Yeah.
don't have a plan, Eric, and we're working as quickly as
Wendy-
possible, and we have a team, we have some other things in this district that
So-
we're working on as well. And with all due respect, we're working as timely as possible. You and everyone else knows we've made a lot of changes, and we are working as fast as we can and as thoughtfully as we can. And although the timeline is not ideal, and I get it, and I'm as frustrated as you are about it, please know that as we work and get information, we would get that information out to the public as soon as we can so that it's right and we're not going back and redoing. I've met with George today, and I said, George, have we checked and rechecked so when we make decisions about moving forward on whatever it is, we're not going back and spending additional time and additional monies because we rushed and made a decision and we're not thoughtful in those decisions. So I understand, I get your frustration because the public wants answers. You're the people there saying, hey, what's going on? And we want to make sure we're thoughtful with our processes too, and making sure that we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's, because we want it to be a good experience for our students, and we want to make sure we're maximizing our dollars, and we're making sure some of the things we can't control, like that different mods that are going away, what's our traffic patterns going to look like. Now we have parking lot for cars. Well, what about school buses? All of those things. We have to be thoughtful in making those decisions to come up with those plans.
My recommendation would be that we have to have something, we need to have, the plan has to be in place before the end of the 16, next school year. So we need to have,
Agree, before December.
okay, well,
we've talked.
that's what I'm
yes.
looking, that's what I'm looking for.
yes.
So if- Okay, then
Yes.
I'm comfortable. As long
Yes.
as I know, okay, we're going to have it by the end of this year, okay, I'm cool with that.
Yes.
Clear that it's on the superintendent's radar, and it is in her purview. So
I understand.
let's,
Yeah, well, the community is really concerned, and that was the only reason why I asked the
Right.
question anyways, but you can tell it's a hot issue.
Right.
Many of the things that you mentioned, I find very comforting, and I think one of the things when you're communicating out is, we learned a lot from the Wiley implementation. First of all, while it was expensive, it was very, very successful. And I think the community needs to be reminded of the fact that, we didn't have scheduling blow-ups.
Right.
The city of University Heights was really assuming the absolute worst. I mean, they thought the parking and all the streets were gonna be, I mean, the community was up in arms. I mean, the fact is, you guys pulled it off and you did a phenomenal job.
Thank you. Yeah.
And sometimes, maybe the community needs to be reminded of that in a nice way, that as thoughtful as it was,
Right.
we can do the middle schools in the same way.
Right.
But the issue was, it was really expensive.
Right.
And it can't be this expensive
Right.
this time, and we need to do a better job in our
And
planning.
that's why that's why I changed the administrative team. I put one point person. So Pat McNichols, and with that team with Denise Lackey, I'm not concerned. But I just want to make sure we're doing it thoughtfully and that we put it on, when we write it down, we will say to the public, here's the plan, and it's solid.
Well,
So I think we made our points.
Well, no, what I was going to suggest is that the things that you said this evening, that, okay, this is false, this is, what we know for certain now, I think there, and going to Jim's point, I think there's value in things that we know that are rumors, what have you, and misinformation.
Right.
Let's let folks know that now, so that we can at least, nip those in the
Nip the
bud. We
bud.
don't have all the details, we don't know all the details, but we know these things are happening.
But let's also remember that one of our jobs as board members is to sometimes help the community to say, okay, just take a breath and give.
But I
give her-
can't convey that if I don't have the
understand,
answers.
but you don't always have to have the answers. Sometimes you have to say,
Then I look like a dope. I don't want to look like a dope.
You don't look like a dope.
I may
but
look
you-
like other things, but I don't look like a dope.
Right.
That's,
But, thank you. You clearly have a handle on this. Are there other things?
I don't want to look like a dope.
I know.
No, I do. I want to look like Eric.
Why, thank you.
You're welcome.
After your comments before, I had another long list of,
All right, then
We'll
if
be
there's
all right.
nothing
One of
else,
those
I'll
people.
take a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Second.
Mr. Gaynor?
Mr. Posh?
Yes.
Mr. Register?
Yes.
Mr. Silverman?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. Zucker?
Yes. Thank you.